Thursday afternoon to 4 o'clock time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good day. NFL Scouting Combine will get underway in Indianapolis in just a few days, early part of next week. Obviously, a lot of the attention will be the draft-eligible prospects, but NFL insider of The Athletic, Diana Rossini, thinks with all the GMs there and all the player agents there, the talks about Myles Garrett could heat up as well.
I expect that to pick up, actually, over the next week or two, knowing that Myles Garrett's agent is going to be at the Combine talking to teams, talking to people around the league about what's going on. I can just tell you what I know at this point, and that's the Browns do not want to move him. They've gotten calls from teams in the NFC, they've gotten calls from teams in the AFC, and they've been told all the same thing. We're not moving him for now. So I have found the word "for now" interesting, yes, because the conversations I've had have been more, no, it's like, just kill the story. We're not trading him. It's over. Like, just stop. Myles is going to be in Cleveland. But for now, it makes it interesting. So I think we could see some movement if there is any. If Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski wind up, let's say, maybe taking a page out of the way Houston did it with Deshaun Watson, where it was essentially an auction, right? Where it was everybody put together their best offers, and at the end they made a decision of, okay, this is what we're going to do. So we'll see if it gets down there, or if it goes down that road. But I can tell you, especially when I was in New Orleans, the Browns were very, very loud about making sure we all knew to put out to the world that they are not moving Myles Garrett. We'll see how it pans out.
Again, if they move him before June 1st, it would be a $36 million dead cap hit. If it's after June 1st, they can spread it out over 2 years. Still a lot of money that you can't spend on upgrading a roster. Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network's draft analyst, met with the media conference call today. Talked about weighing, and this was relative to quarterbacks at number one, weighing a quarterback with a higher upside or a higher floor, so better or less risk, and relative to Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, where they fit into that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the age-old debate, right? You know, do you want safe and floor, or do you want, kind of exciting and upside? I always feel like, again, for the same reasons I've referenced earlier, it's just that the high-level quarterback play, particularly in the AFC right now, it's hard to go with the floor instead of the ceiling there, and know, hey, if we go with the ceiling, and we can hopefully have enough a rope to come around and try and go get another one at some point in time. I mean, nothing's guaranteed, but I always tend to be a little bit more, let's chase the upside a little bit when we're up there. So that's the direction I would go. When you look at this group compared to last year, I just pull up my list from last year. I had Cam Ward with the same grade as Bo Nix. So that would put him behind those top four for me. So he'd be, kind of in that fifth range. And Michael Penix, I had just slightly ahead of Shedeur. So Shedeur would be behind those guys, behind Caleb Drake, Jaden McCarthy, Nix, Penix. Then I would have Shedeur right behind that group.
Again, probably first-round talent. The fact that so many first-rounders were in last year's draft, so it's interesting. This is very deep running back class. Everybody says that. NFL Network's Daniel Jeremiah, that same conference call, asked which running backs in this class would fit the Browns scheme the best.
The first one that just popped right into my head is Caleb Johnson from Iowa. Someone who I just think he's that one cut, foot in the ground, speed and go. He's got excellent vision. He's not going to be a real, like nifty in and out guy. He's just going to see it and go. And he's got burst, and he's got long speed. Hampton obviously would fit into that as a big explosive guy. I think he's a little more loose than Johnson, but that would fit there as well. There's Dylan Sampson, not the biggest guy in the world, a little bit undersized out of Tennessee, but he's again, he can get to the perimeter, get north and south and go. He's got big time burst. don't think he's going to time as fast as he plays, but he plays plenty fast. But I mean, the two Ohio State guys can play in any scheme with Judkins and Henderson. And with those two individually, Judkins is he's a finisher. Like, you watch the end of the Penn State game, he's their 4-minute back and he just salts the game away. He's got balance, strength, power, passing game wise, more screens, check down type. Whereas Henderson is one of the best pass protecting backs that I've evaluated. He is exceptional in that regard. And then he can run routes, he can pluck it, and he can hit home runs out of the backfield. He's not quite as good of a dirty runner inside as Judkins is, but definitely a home run hitter who in that system, again, stretch and then get up the field and use your speed and then be a factor in the passing game. Travion Henderson is outstanding.
And again, that's assuming the Browns go back to that zone scheme that they ran with Kevin Stefanski so successful before last season. All right, some news around the NFL, what people are saying. Jordan Schultz saying he can't see Jamar Chase accepting a deal worth less than $40 million a year. Chase wants to reset the market for wide receivers by a comfortable margin. Schultz notes it's the downside of the Bengals not getting a deal done with him last year. Bengals are also going to have to pay T. Higgins, who they can franchise again, and Trey Hendrickson wants to talk contract as well. Nick Chubb, reports are that he has said he is willing to join the Bears if Cleveland wants to go in another direction. Chubb and DeAndre Swift, currently with the Bears, were teammates in college at Georgia, so they'll connect the dots there. And also some news coming out of Los Angeles that the Chargers are getting ready and expected to release Joey Bosa before the beginning of the league new year in a couple of weeks. Also, the New York Jets are expected to be a top suitor for Kirk Cousins. Rick Spielman is in that front office group there now that he was also with Cousins and the Vikings. That from NFL Rumors. So it sounds like the Browns might have some competition for Kirk Cousins should they decide to go down that road. Some news from around the NBA as well. The Bucks lose a pretty good player. Bobby Portis has been suspended 25 games for violating the league's anti-drug policy. It involves a pain-killing drug. Portis says he took the wrong one. It was a mix-up. Thought he was taking one that was approved, took one that was on the banned substance. He is suspended for 25 games. And this is concerning Victor Wembanyama. Expected to miss the remainder of the season with deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder. That's a fancy name for what is in essence a blood clot up there. So certainly hope Wembanyama is okay. News for the Cavaliers, though. The Cavaliers have gone out and signed another guy. They signed forward Javonte Green, a big guy who can guard on the wing. He was bought out by the Pelicans. Reports are the Cavs will be signing him once he clears waivers. It gives them an additional wing that can defend at a high level. So the Cavs continue to improve roster and upgrade areas that they need to contend for what they hope is an NBA championship run. Brian Windhorst, national NBA analyst, was asked, are the Cavs legitimate NBA contenders?
I wouldn't have them as the favorite. I think they can beat anybody in a series under the right circumstances. They are an elite three-point shooting team. They are a strong defensive team. Their one weakness was size on the wing. Teams with big wings were giving them problems throughout the year. I don't know if DeAndre Hunter solves the problem, but it certainly addresses it. They are better equipped to defend Boston than they were a couple of weeks ago. I will love to see that play out in a 7-game series.
And Javonte Green helps them defend the Celtics even a little bit better than they were before they got him on the buyout market or will get him on the buyout market. All right, Chris Antonetti, a friend of the show, Anthony Kastrovich, talking to him just about the Guardians starting rotation and what Antonetti has assembled this year.
Chris, last year you guys achieved great things despite really struggling to piece together a rotation and keep guys healthy. How did that inform the way you built this pitching staff for 2025?
Well, one of our primary goals going into the offseason was really to supplement our pitching at every turn. And so we feel throughout the course of the offseason, we've been able to add a number of pitchers to the already exciting mix of guys that we had here. And we're excited to see that group come in and compete and earn spots on our team.
And part of your offseason was retaining Shane Bieber coming off Tommy John. How exciting is it to see him back on a mound?
It's been awesome. He had his first bullpen the other day and looked great, so much so that we actually had to ask him to pull back a little bit because he almost looked too good. So hopefully he stays on the path he's on and can impact us at some point this year.
Your position player group, obviously, Jose Ramirez and Stephen Kwan lead that, but within your system, guys who could, develop at the big league level this season, who are you excited to see?
I think we're first and foremost excited to see the continued development and maturation of some of the guys that were on our roster last year, all of whom have had really productive winters. Guys like Brian Rocchio, Kyle Manzardo, Bo Naylor put in a ton of work this winter, and we're really excited to see what the next step in their development is. And then beyond that, the strength of our system is really upper-level position players, and we believe that wave of guys could impact us at some point this year.
And you guys and Carlos Santana just can't quit each other. What is it like having him back in the clubhouse again?
It's so awesome having him back. We've had a few chances to catch up over the last few days, and he is all smiles, and so are we. He's such an awesome player with great perspective and can really help us shape some of the young players and their routines and what it means to be a professional and major league player.
Exhibition games start over the weekend in Goodyear, Arizona, so we will continue to monitor the Guardians as they get ready for the season. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, talking Browns with Ashley Bastock when Sports4CLE continues. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We turn our attention to the Browns. Diana Rossini from The Athletic on the Myles Garrett trade request situation. This is from The Herd with Colin Cowherd.
They do not want to move him. Look, I was told that this thing could get messy, right? And the reason why it can get messy, because you got two sides on very opposite sides of what they want to do. I just spoke with an NFL agent, a high-powered one, and he said to me, while I was walking over here, he said, this is about guaranteed money, right? This is all contract. This is just a play for Myles to get more money. I said, absolutely not. This is the one case where the player truly wants to go to a team where he can go win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So at some point here, both sides, they're going to have to come to a decision because Myles Garrett is not going to step on that field unless he's going to get shipped out of Cleveland. So I don't know how this thing ends. I can just tell you that teams around the league are calling, they're trying, they're discussing, and they want to get their business in order before the start of the new league year in March.
Yes.
So they can make decisions on how they're going to spend their money in free agency, how they're going to draft. So I think this thing is going to actually pick up over the next few weeks as we know that teams are going to want some answers here.
Let's welcome in Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter from Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Ashley, everybody wants an answer, and the answer is it can't happen until after June 1st because it costs them $36 million.
Exactly. I mean, it would be cost prohibitive given the Browns' current cap space, their current cap situation. Now, we know this regime is really good at working with that, right? You have to be with the Deshaun Watson contract as well. But yeah, that to me adds another layer to everything. And it's this idea of if the Browns would change course and say, oh, well, we are going to see what we can get for Myles Garrett. Well, in theory, then if you trade him after June 1st, if that becomes the avenue you pursue, you won't get any draft compensation for him for this year. And I almost think that gives other teams a chance to shortchange their end of the deal a little bit in terms of what they're going to offer. And then it becomes well, is this worth it for us? And it's an interesting conundrum to be in at this point. And, again, we haven't seen Myles Garrett out and about really since his Radio Row tour at the Super Bowl. But what no one really that I saw seemed to ask him in those interviews is, well, is there a number that would change your mind? What might that look like? What might be enticing enough to stay here? Because I always bring up the example of there was another guy who didn't want to come to Cleveland until the right number got put in front of him. And suddenly, when $230 million fully guaranteed was on the table, Deshaun Watson changed course after the Browns had initially been told they were out of the running, right? And obviously that hasn't worked out. But it is the perfect example of, hey, sometimes a guy can be done with a team, want to go somewhere, have his heart set on somewhere. But at the end of the day, I do still think there is a chance that everyone has a price too. So the money aspects of this continue to be the most interesting for me on both sides. And it also is why I don't think there's going to be a quick, neat, and tidy solution to any of this.
No, and Andrew Berry has said they're probably going to make him an offer that would make him the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. That's going to be a lot of money. I don't know what the exact figure is, but it's gonna add up quickly.
It would be a lot of money. And what the Browns have that some other teams don't have, because you look at the wants of these two sides, and they are at opposite ends of the spectrum, because Myles Garrett says he wants to play for a contender, right? Well, if the Browns trade him to one, the draft compensation won't be as good. We know that already. But the other element of that is, would those contenders even be able to pay him, right? For example, if you're the Detroit Lions, you got to worry about all the young guys that you hit on in the draft recently, most notably your star edge rusher currently in Aiden Hutchinson. They're going to have to figure out how to pay him coming up here really quickly. The Browns, if they give him an extension, they would have the space then to space his money out more throughout their cap. Like, that's why it would be such a big deal for them to get that done, because we obviously know their cap situation is what it is. But to bring him back on another extension, you give yourself that leeway. So it's like the Browns can do it, but could some of these other teams that, hey, wouldn't have as good compensation anyway, could they afford to pursue a deal with him? And I don't know in some of their cases.
So I know you've talked about this on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast with Mary Kay Cabot, Dan Lobby. What if the Browns pass on a quarterback at number 2?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question given the current state of what everyone thinks of this quarterback class, right? It's not 2024 where those 6 guys went off the board so fast in the first round. We know Jim Nagy at the Senior Bowl essentially said he doesn't know if any quarterbacks in this year's class would have cracked that top 6 last year. I think it's a fair question. Now, Andrew Berry at the Senior Bowl told my colleague Mary Kay Cabot and a couple other reporters down in Mobile that he does think there are quarterbacks in this draft who could be starters. But I am intrigued by this idea of, well, what are they really going to think of Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders? Because while I don't hate them taking a quarterback at 2, if they think it's somebody who has the potential to be a franchise guy, somebody who they think they can work with, if you don't think that about either of those guys, or if you only think that about one and he is gone because the Tennessee Titans take him, or the Raiders jump ahead of you to take him with a trade with the Titans, right? There's all these scenarios. If you only think one guy is the guy and he's not there, then what do you do? And I am not necessarily of the belief that you absolutely have to use the number 2 pick on a quarterback if you don't believe in that guy, or if you're just not that enamored with them. And maybe you find a solution another way, because there are obviously 2 really, really top tier players at the top of this draft who are not quarterbacks in Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. So it kind of depends. I think everything is predicated upon what you think of Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward and the rest of this quarterback class, and what you think a solution is there, because you have to take at least one quarterback in this draft.
Yep.
But if you like another guy who you might be able to get later, it's a gamble, but it's certainly a possibility. You know, when I was playing around with the PFF mock draft simulator this week, I took Jalen Milroe in the second round, right, to allow the Browns to take Abdul Carter with the number 2 pick. And the simulator hated that pick because it said that's way too high for Jalen Milroe. Now, in actuality, he might go higher than that. He might not be available to them at 33 in the second round. But right now, when you look at how that board is kind of laid out, there's some interesting options if he is a guy they like, or a Jackson Dart, but you might have to fight a little bit for a guy like that.
Yeah, at 2, you better get a guy, you know, the guys that they have taken recently that high, Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. You got to get a guy like that. I don't care what position it's at. They got to be an all-pro that you can say, yep, we took him high in the draft. And if a quarterback isn't there, the way you get in trouble is picking well, he was the best that was there.
Yeah, I think it's something that can't be forced, right? And there's so many factors that go into quarterback evaluation in the NFL, and the Browns might see something with one of these guys that other teams aren't seeing, or they might value something more than another team values, and they think, hey, we can get Cam Ward, or we can get Shedeur Sanders in our building, and this is the quarterback of the future for us for reasons X, Y, and Z, then by all means, go ahead and take that guy. These chances don't come around a lot. And I think that is the part of the reason of why it's so tantalizing when you have the number 2 pick to look at those quarterbacks, because, you know, everyone I think is chasing that success the Kansas City Chiefs have found with Patrick Mahomes, or like an even more extreme example, the success the 49ers have found by finding Brock Purdy so late in the draft. So you're not always going to have that. But if you have your reasons for thinking you found it, even if it's a guy who people are saying, oh, he's not as strong as any of the guys in last year's quarterback class, or the guys who will be in the next one in theory, you take your chance when you have it. So I think that's why it all depends on how you feel about the quarterbacks. You kind of have to let that dictate your move.
So I know you also wrote an article just about the most intriguing guys heading into the combine. And you had Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Travion Henderson. The concern I have with Hunter, he's a really good cornerback. He's a really good wide receiver. You have to have a plan for how you're going to use him, because it's almost like a guy that has he has the ultimate positional flexibility, and you can overwhelm a guy if you try to ask him to do too much too soon.
Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting about him as a prospect, because if you're an NFL team, you don't want him to become this sort of jack of all trades, master of none, and have it work to his disadvantage. So I think what's so interesting is obviously no one is claiming to know where exactly he would play. And he's working out, and he's scheduled to talk with the defensive backs at the NFL Combine next week. But even that doesn't mean anything, really. He played a handful more defensive snaps, so it sounds like that's why they put him there. And also, if he's there with them earlier than the other skill position offensive players are going to be, then he can still, in theory, work out in some of those offensive drills over the weekend. So I'm really curious to see if we get him doing any of that as well. But I think when you get him into whatever team's locker room he ends up on, I think the way you figure it out, obviously, where you're going to want to put him, but you can still use him, I think, on both sides of the ball, even if you have some nickel or dime packages that you want to put him in as a DB if you would rather use him as a receiver. But I even think the easier option would be trade him as a DB and maybe have some gadget plays to throw him in as a receiver if you want. I think it kind of depends on the team he goes to, what their needs are, what they see in him. And we'll get that more clear picture, I think, once he's actually drafted. I think at this point, that's really the only way to do it, because he hasn't flat out come out and said, oh, I'm only pursuing being a receiver at the next level, or I'm only pursuing being a corner at the next level.
Let's skip ahead to Henderson before we go to break. I'm intrigued. I think he could end up, I think he was really good at Ohio State. I think he could end up being one of those guys that's a pretty good college player who's an even better pro.
I think so too. He has become one of my quote unquote draft crushes. I mean, I think he's going to be available on day 2, and it's a position group that you can find a lot of value in. And this is a really deep running back class. It's the deepest one since in my memory of covering the NFL. And this is my 4th or 5th combine here. So I'm really intrigued by him and why I singled him out in specifically. Everyone pretty much has him rated below Judkins. So let's assume his Ohio State teammate is going first. If Henderson is available, he can pass protect, which we know the Browns love. I think any NFL team would really value that. He can catch passes. He is reliable. He hasn't fumbled the ball in 3 years. That's the stat that truly blew me away, I thought. And he's produced on the ground, obviously. He might not be the most creative runner from what I'm seeing and reading, but he gets the job done. And I think an NFL team, whatever team takes him, they're going to have a lot there to work with, and a guy who seems really coachable, ready to learn, and already has a pretty good diverse skill set from playing in that Ohio State offense and obviously coming off of a national title win now.
Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com and Ogden. Step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, Greg Cosell, NFL Films, with what he thinks QB1 in this draft is. We'll hear from him. Sports4CLE will continue.
Are you ready? The Ohio Lottery is about to unleash 50 new millionaires on Ohio. Want a chance to become one? Play VIP Millions. With 50 $1 million winning tickets, it's your best chance to win $1 million ever.
We continue talking Browns with Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Greg Cosell, NFL Films, watches as much film as anybody. He studied some of the quarterbacks in this year's draft, the top ones. Here is who he thinks is QB1.
I've done 3 quarterbacks in detail that I'm done with at this point, and I've watched probably 20-plus games of each of them. So 3, I've done Cam Ward, I've done Sanders, and I've done Jackson Dart.
Okay, how do they stack up?
Those 3, to me, I would say that Ward would easily be my number 1 of those 3. And I do think that Ward is worthy of a top pick. I really like his game. Again, I don't know the players, and obviously with a quarterback, you have to have a feel for them as a person and a lot of other things that go into quarterback play, toughness, although I do know some people out at Washington State, and Louis Riddick, who I know well, has I think done 4 games with Cam Ward over the last 4 years, and I've heard nothing but great things about him. The word I keep hearing is he's a dog and he's highly accountable. So, those are real positives. But to me, Cam Ward, based on just solely tape, without those other things, which I'm hearing from other people, I think Ward really looks like a good prospect to me.
Actually, it's kind of interesting, you watch him play and there's some throws where you kind of scratch your head. But again, that's a guy that does that and does it at the NFL level. He's used to seeing what it takes to play quarterback at the NFL level.
Yeah, I think this narrative around Cam Ward over the next 2 weeks is one of the things I'm most intrigued to watch, because Shedeur Sanders has been out there, right? Like, he talked at the East-West Shrine Bowl. He was on Radio Row. He was on the red carpet at NFL Honors with Dion. But Cam Ward has not really been out and about doing interviews. And I think when we talk to quarterbacks at the Combine next Friday, you might really see to start things shift, because that's going to be his first big media session that he's doing throughout this process. And you saw his comments, obviously, from earlier in the week when he was talking about, why he thinks he's worthy of the top pick as well. And again, I think that those are some of the first comments we've heard from him throughout this pre-draft process so far. So I'm curious to see it seems like Shedeur Sanders has his own narratives going, obviously, about himself, not competing with one another necessarily, but you just talk about who's being talked about, in what ways are they being talked about, in what way are their games being talked about. And you just have more of Shedeur Sanders available right now. So when Cam Ward gets up to that podium on Friday, I don't think either of those guys right now looks like we might not see them throw at the combine over the weekend. But those media sessions, especially, really curious to see how they carry themselves, and Cam Ward in particular, just because we haven't really gotten to see that from him yet.
Yeah, it will definitely be interesting. So we're getting some reports, that Jeremy Fowler, one of them, that Browns offensive tackle DeJuan Jones recently underwent arthroscopic knee surgery, lingering issue that he played through last year, according to a source. We'll get off crutches, begin running around soon, and be ready for camp. So that's good. You know what? I don't want to say that's really good news, but it would explain why he couldn't do some of the things that he did as a rookie if he was trying to work through that, especially when you're as big as DeJuan Jones is.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that is something to keep an eye on, just because of the fact we're looking at a guy who hasn't been able to finish either of the last 2 seasons due to injury. And now the broken bones in his leg, that was kind of a freak thing in the New Orleans game, right? It's not due to the knee injury, the torn MCL he suffered his rookie year 2 years ago. But you do, I think, at this stage with him, want to make sure that he is healthy. And it does explain, I think DeJuan was the first guy of those 3 tackles who got back from their 2023 season-ending injuries. He made it back the quickest. And I think he was pushing himself very hard, knowing they were going to be in a tough spot at tackle. And with that, who knows what he was playing through in order to get out on the field when he felt like he was needed, or he obviously wanting to be out there as well and putting that pressure on yourself. So definitely I'm curious to see him the next time we talk to DeJuan, but it is good to hear whatever was lingering. It sounds like they've gotten it pinpointed, and hopefully he comes back the strongest he has been since he's been in the NFL.
All right, we'll get to your mock draft in just a second, but this is kind of interesting. This surprise trade candidates, the 33rd team, so those are former NFL player, executive kind of guys. They say Garrett Wilson, the only trade the Jets should consider a 2-plan move, moving the 24-year-old who will want a massive contract extension worth more than $30 million a year to move up in the top 10 of the 2025 draft, which would give the Jets a tremendous package of picks. Tennessee or Cleveland might be willing to trade down for those picks. All right, here's a question for you. The Jets call your Andrew Berry. They say, we will give you Garrett Wilson and 7 for number 2. Are you doing it?
That's a pretty enticing offer.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know they'll listen to good offers like that. I think truly, and I said this about my own mock draft, and knowing, for example, I could get an edge rusher later, would that make me take a quarterback over taking an Abdul Carter? And my response is, well, it all depends on how I feel about the quarterbacks. Because again, if I look at Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders and say, he's my guy, or one of the 2 of them can be my guy, even better scenario, you got to hold on to that number 2 pick for dear life. However, if I'm looking at the 2 of them and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how strongly I feel about it. And, it is a deep edge rusher class. We can get somebody in the 2nd round. And we don't necessarily need Travis Hunter because we have Denzel Ward, even though we think he's going to be a great player. Then I might make the deal. I would make the deal, I think, at that point. But I think you have to think about the quarterbacks independently and decide, is my franchise guy there? Because if yes, there's not a trade I'm making to pass him up. But if not, then all bets are off at that point.
Yeah, I'm with you. If you think you can solve the quarterback problem for the next 10 years, given that you've gone 30 whatever without it, you probably need to solve the quarterback problem. All right, let's take a look at your mock draft, and we'll do it quickly. I know you got to run. You had Abdul Carter going 2, so you had the Browns taking the edge rusher. Then you mentioned Jalen Milroe, Travion Henderson, and then you got the tight end Ferguson from Oregon. What did you like about Carter? We talked a little bit about Milroe and Henderson. What did you like about Carter?
I mean, I just like his productivity as a pass rusher in obviously a really difficult conference. And the thing for me is the Browns have never really found a true pass rushing partner for Myles Garrett. He's had to shoulder the burden of that work. Now, you look at the Myles Garrett situation, whether he does, in a twist of fate, end up being traded away from Cleveland if the Browns change their position and decide to move him. Whether that happens or whether he remains a Cleveland Brown, Abdul Carter, I think, could be his heir apparent in either scenario, and he would be the first true young edge rushing partner the Browns have for him. And I think the load would be split a little more evenly. And I think in this defense, you need ideally 3, but at least 2 guys getting double-digit sacks. You look at the Eagles' defense, it's much more spread out. I think their top sack guy had like 8 sacks for the season, right? That's the Super Bowl winning defense. I think you can spread things out a bit more. And maybe doing it with 2 superstars is asking too much. But the Browns have been out of the first round in these last handful of years when there have been really deep D-line classes available. They've been out of the running, so they haven't gotten that true first-round caliber young guy to pair opposite of Myles Garrett, and instead they banked on these one-year deals for guys like Jadeveon Clowney and Zadarius Smith, and it just hasn't worked. So I think when I looked between him and Travis Hunter and what do the Browns need more, I went with that edge-rushing heir apparent / partner in Abdul Carter.
Ashley Bastock, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Ashley.
Thanks.
Ashley Bastock, make sure you check her out. Browns beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Always really, really good and insightful coverage of the Browns. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, the Cleveland Browns on SI, and the Locked On Browns podcast straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Are you ready? The Ohio Lottery is about to unleash 50 new millionaires on Ohio. Want a chance to become one? Play VIP Millions. With 50 $1 million winning tickets, it's your best chance to win $1 million ever.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Daniel Jeremiah from the NFL Network was asked about all the trade talk that's surrounding the Rams quarterback, Matthew Stafford.
There has been a lot of chatter and talking to guys around the league. You know, the Stafford stuff, I mean, I don't know if there's legs to it, but I know that it has got a lot of people in personnel departments and general managers intrigued in seeing what's going to transpire there with him and the Rams. And the fact that that they didn't just come out and say he's not going anywhere has led people to believe that that's a possibility.
Let's welcome in Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Browns on SI, and the Locked On Browns podcast. So, Spencer, I guess the question is, does Matthew Stafford, is he a guy that could get Myles Garrett back on board, you think?
I would think. I think when Myles was having these conversations with the Browns about their their future plans and what they were going to do. And he's thinking probably through like what veteran options are out there that they could consider. And you hear Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones. I'm sure all those were kind of, very like meh response or very meh answers for him to hear. But you probably weren't accounting for somebody like like Matt Stafford being available. And so you hear that a guy who's won a Super Bowl, who's I think is still playing at a high enough level that you can still compete on that stage and that time of year. Granted, the AFC gauntlet of quarterbacks you got to go through is obviously much tougher than the NFC. But like I think that's something that at least piques his interest and maybe makes him reconsider things. He's talked so much during his radio tours on Radio Row and whatnot about how the quarterback is the most important thing he's looking for. And so if like this surprise idea kind of pops up and Matt Stafford's somebody that the Browns end up having a realistic shot at, I would hope that he could at least like think about it and maybe give the Browns a chance to, convince him to stay, because that might have not been somebody on their radar before. So I think for sure it makes you rethink whether or not he wants to stick around or not.
Yeah, and there are obviously financial things they'd have to work around, but if you get Garrett buying into it, then you extend him, you get the contract, you get his number down. That's where you can shift the money to the quarterback, because people are going to be going, well, he's going to want 34, They know how to maneuver the salary cap. That's one. I don't have a question. I have some questions about Andrew Berry. Salary cap ones, I have no questions.
Yeah, I've kind of joked like, when the Browns got Andrew Berry, they were trying to get somebody from the Howie Roseman tree, and it was an innovative idea at the time. I mean, Howie Roseman's obviously great, and he's got 2 Super Bowls to show for it. But the one thing, there's questions maybe about Andrew Berry's roster building and ability to draft guys. But the one thing he has followed suit on with Howie Roseman is his ability to manipulate these contracts and, prolong your window of competing because of that. Because I think the Browns are 3rd in terms of like void years being used and money in void years. And the Eagles are number 1 in the league. So he did bring that with him. He has been able to do that. And that's why, anytime I talk about these topics, or I talk about like guys that could be in play for the Browns, and it gets dismissed by listeners or whatever, who are with just this simple answer of, well, they can't afford that guy. I always just kind of say, well, I don't necessarily think that's an issue. Like the cap stuff, sometimes it goes a little bit over my head, but I do understand how these GMs these days, work the books to be able to sort of, create enough cap space to have the flexibility they need in any given offseason. And so unless it's something completely outlandish, I think there's almost always ways to get, most guys that are potentially available on the roster and get their contracts accounted for in the salary cap.
All right. So what do you think? Do you think a veteran or a rookie quarterback is the right move for the Browns?
So it's interesting because, I think we started this conversation in the right spot with Stafford, because for me, if I'm thinking about like what a big board of quarterbacks would look like for me, I think Stafford is probably number 1 on that list, because he's the most like veteran proven guy. Again, has won a Super Bowl, still I think has some juice in his game in terms of being able to play, even though he's getting up there towards 40. And I think you would trust him the most as like an NFL ready player. But after him, I think if it's not Stafford, for me, it's a rookie. And I think the reason for that is, like, I understand you can sit there and like grade these guys, and you can sit there and say like, well, I don't think there is a Jaden Daniels in this class, or I don't think that, these guys would be 6th or 7th or whatever. I know Daniel Jeremiah has been talking about it, and Dane Brugger's been talking about it from The Athletic, like where these guys would have ranked in last year's quarterback class. And last year's quarterback class was phenomenal. We know that. So I get that. But, if I'm thinking about, okay, do I want to sign up for a Sam Darnold who towards the end of the season kind of reverted back to being the Sam Darnold that we all knew? Or do I want to sign up for a rookie that at least, I understand you can grade a guy how you grade a guy, but there's always an unknown with any of these players that you're drafting. There's always an unknown with these quarterbacks that you're drafting, that maybe they get to the next level and they do get it. Like, you can say what you want about their games and break it down from every angle and be like, well, he's just not going to cut it. And then sometimes there's just this like it factor about a guy that emerges when they're, when the bullets are flying out on the field and they kind of figure it out. So I think just like the potential of, this player that hasn't yet played at the NFL level, and, his full arsenal hasn't been necessarily been realized. And I always try to leave room for coaching, helping a guy get better as well. All those things are factors. And so, I'd probably lean a rookie if it's not Matthew Stafford, with the exception of like, I can sign up for, like, I'd sign up for like a Kirk Cousins for like a $1.2 million. Like at that point, why not give it a try? But I think like the rookie options are all way more appealing to me than most of the veteran options that are out there.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is I want both. The answer I would give is both.
Yeah.
But just so you don't, so if you look at a rookie and he's not ready to play, you don't throw him out there. If you look at him and he's ready to play, have at it, son. Show us what you got.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this real quick, Dave. Like, I think you're probably onto something because I think they're going to do both. I would be shocked if they don't get somebody in some form in free agency or via trade that's a veteran and then pair him with a rookie. And that might be a rookie that they take, maybe it's Jackson Dart, you take him in the second round, or maybe it's Will Howard and you take him in the third round. I don't know, but I do think they will ultimately take both of those things.
Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Browns on SI, and the Locked On Browns podcast. Now I can step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear from Daniel Jeremiah about the quarterbacks in this year's draft. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. Full Court Action is a half hour devoted exclusively to men's and women's basketball from across the Mid-American Conference. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Bacon. Join me at 6:30 Tuesday nights, and we'll meet the coaches and players from the Mid-American Conference who are making an impact in basketball. Full Court Action will spotlight the top plays and performances from all across the Mid-American Conference with some historical action as well. Catch Full Court Action Tuesday nights at 6:30 on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Browns on SI, and the Locked On Browns podcast. We've talked about Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network's draft analyst. His recent mock draft released late last night had the Browns going with Cam Ward, number 2. Here's his rationale for it.
Having scouted in that division for a couple different teams, we always wanted guys who were, real rugged and strong. It's a physical division. You're going to play in wind and weather as you go throughout the season. Arm strength matters a little bit more there. Look, I'm not saying that Shedeur can't play there. He could fit in the system for sure. And, if they went in that direction, that wouldn't, totally blindside me or shock me. I just, know from being in that division and talking to people inside that division, that's something that carries a little more weight than maybe in other spots. So I just liked his ability. If you look at Baker, and I know I obviously went sideways there at the end, but even though Baker wasn't a really big guy, I thought his arm played really, really well there. And there were some ups and some downs, but I didn't think that was an issue there at all. And I think there is some of that, with Cam Ward. He's just got a real live arm. So that's why I like that fit.
And the other thing, Spencer, he said he had him ranked even with Bo Nix if you looked at the last 2. So you could probably talk me into Cam Ward. The one thing is they got to feel good about it. At 2, you got to get somebody who's going to impact you. And I keep going back to Garrett was number 1, Ward was number 4. You get a guy like that. You got to get a guy like that at 2.
I also think the weather thing is interesting because we know what's coming down the pike for the Browns, right? And I understand it's still, 4 years away that they're going to have this dome. But if you're drafting a quarterback at 2, I would assume the Browns are envisioning he is their Patrick Mahomes, their Josh Allen, their Lamar Jackson. Like it's somebody who's going to be here for a long period of time. And so, yeah, like throwing in the weather and the elements, like that's going to matter for a few years. But at some point when they're playing most of their games in a dome, that won't necessarily be as big of a factor. So I don't know how much that'll factor in the decision for the Browns in this draft specifically, if that's kind of where their head's at with it anyway. But I see his point. And I do think, as you alluded to, I as I've watched these guys and as I've read more about like what even some of the real experts say about them, because I'm by no means like I don't have a scouting background. I've kind of had to learn this stuff on my own. I do think like Cam Ward probably has like the higher upside in terms of like what he brings to the table. And a lot of that is just his arm talent. So from a prospect standpoint, like I'm probably more excited about Cam Ward and the potential for him to do it at the next level and become great. But I do think Shedeur actually fits the Browns better from a standpoint of the offense that Kevin Stefanski runs, rhythm and timing, very, very accurate quarterback. And I know that there's some concerns about his arm strength, but I think he's also shown at times that he can make some of the big time throws and get the ball to, from one hash to the opposite side of the field. So I'm not as worried about that, but I think like if you're talking about either of these guys, to your point, like the Browns have to figure out which one they like better or which one they really, really love and they think is going to be the next big thing. And whoever that is, you take them at 2 if you find that to be how you feel about them and how you evaluate them.
All right, so you wrote an article, 5 free agent names to watch for with the Browns. You got number 1 is Nick Chubb, number 2 Dre Greenlaw, linebacker for the Niners, Dante Fowler, edge for the Commanders, Braxton Berrios, wide receiver, and free safety Justin Simmons. We'll get to Chubb in a minute because I know we want to talk about the talk that he might go to the Steelers. Who do you like? I mean, when you look at guys that you think fit that would really make a difference, which of those guys on that list kind of jumps out to you?
Yeah, so I'll start with Greenlaw real quick because the thing that's interesting about Greenlaw is I think a lot of that depends on, what we eventually find out about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. If his future really is in jeopardy, if he's, can't play football anymore, which would be devastating and unfortunate. Guy that the Browns, that's a draft pick that Andrew Berry did hit on. And they just gave him the big extension. They felt like he was a future cornerstone piece of this defense. So it'll be really, really tough news if that's the case. But if he can't, be that for them anymore, I think Greenlaw is a really good option because, I'm trying to think through guys that the Browns, when I did this piece, I was trying to think through guys that come at a more moderate price. Because as much as I say, like, you can make most things fit with the salary cap, I also understand, like, the Browns aren't going to be spending like drunken sailors either to address certain needs in free agency. So Greenlaw is interesting because he was coming off the Achilles injury, only played 2 games last year, then was dealing with a calf injury. And so I think he's kind of in line for like a 1-year prove-it deal where he's making like $6 million, $7 million, something like that, and gets a chance to kind of go somewhere and see what he can do. But down the rest of this list, like I think Dante Fowler Jr. could sort of fall into that category of maybe you have to pay a little bit more for him on the open market because he has kind of proven to be a pretty solid pass rusher, but he's also, wrong side of 30, getting up there in terms of age. And he sort of fits that billing for me of a guy that the Browns would, they've kind of done this rent a pass rusher program over the years where they bring in somebody to complement Myles Garrett. Now the future Myles Garrett could change that. Maybe they would give a guy like Fowler, like a little bit of a longer deal to just kind of have somebody solidified on the defensive line for a couple of years. But I kind of like that one as either a compliment to Myles Garrett or a piece that could sort of start you out if you end up having to revamp this defensive line and go in a different direction because you trade Myles Garrett. He'd be a nice kind of foundational piece there. And then the other guys, I think like they make some sense on a lesser level. Braxton Berrios, I think he's kind of like that gadgety style player that Kevin Stefanski could use in his offense, bring some speed to the table, could be a really good slot guy for them. But he's not like, he doesn't have like eye-popping numbers, so you could get him for a pretty moderate price. And then Justin Simmons, another guy who's like wrong side of 30, but we know addressing that free safety spot has been a problem for Andrew Berry. He hasn't been able to really do that much. So if he could land a guy like Simmons and, pay up for him, maybe they finally solidify the back end of their defense and in the 2 safety spots, they finally kind of get those figured out.
All right, before I let you go, we get this tweet from Andrew Filipponi, morning talk host in sports talk host in Pittsburgh. Steelers Insider says the Steelers very much, in quotes, interested in signing Browns running back Nick Chubb in free agency, providing the medicals check out. I'm imagining you don't like the sound of that, Spencer.
No, and I actually wrote a piece today about, losing Myles Garrett would be really, really tough for Browns fans. It'd be a tough pill to swallow, as we know. But I think losing Nick Chubb would be, let me rephrase. Losing Nick Chubb would be unfortunate, I think, no matter where he ends up. But I think losing Nick Chubb to the Steelers would be tougher to swallow for fans than any place that Myles Garrett could go. I guess unless Myles Garrett goes to the Steelers too, but that's not going to happen because the Browns are never going to trade him within the division anyway. So yeah, like it's if he ends up somewhere else, like that's just the nature of the NFL and free agency and that's a possibility. But him going to the Steelers and being part of the organization that for years has, just kind of had you at an arm's length and been able to kind of laugh at your expense and touted their Super Bowl trophies and how successful they've been in all their playoff runs over your head. I mean, the Browns have 10 wins against them since they returned in 1999. Like all those embarrassing moments and that team being able to just rub it in for years, to then add Nick Chubb, who's basically been like the heart and soul of this city for the last 8 years, that would be a big blow for Browns fans and not one that I think they would take well. So I will maintain that I think they'll work something out. I think he'll be back in Cleveland next year. But I know this has been a big topic of conversation the last couple of days because nobody wants to see Nick Chubb go anywhere, but they especially don't want to see him end up on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Spencer German is always great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Spencer.
Of course, Dave. Always a pleasure, man. Take it easy.
Spencer German, make sure you check him out. 92.3 The Fan. Also, Cleveland Browns on SI and the Locked On Browns podcast. Always really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking draft. John Macri from PFF. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Are you ready? The Ohio Lottery is about to unleash 50 new millionaires on Ohio. Want a chance to become one? Play VIP Millions. With 50 $1 million winning tickets, it's your best chance to win $1 million ever.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns and draft on Sports4CLE. Let's welcome in John Macri from PFF. John, appreciate the time. Let's look at the top of the draft. Those two quarterbacks, it's pretty universal. It's either Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. Which of the two do you like?
It's close. I'll probably still say Cam Ward, just the favorite right now, right? I'm not going to pretend to know better than the scouts. I know he's, at the top of our big board as well, but I think it's close. I think you could definitely make a case for Sanders, especially if you start to dive into some of the data as well. A lot of Shedeur Sanders' career college data is actually a little bit better than Cam Ward. You look at like career PFF passing grade, for example. He's a 92nd percentile prospect in that regard, tied with Tua Tagovailoa and Trevor Lawrence. So obviously really good college quarterbacks in their own right. Also very responsible with the ball too. 1.6% turnover worthy play rate for his career, is tied for the best mark coming out of college since 2017 with Jaden Daniels. So lots to like about both guys. I think they have a ton of experience. Obviously that helps. Over 2,000 dropbacks for the two of them. So I don't think, there's any concern about, sample size or anything like that. I think both of these guys there's a lot of encouraging data for them to feel comfortable taking them high in this year's class.
All right, so guys that aren't, at the top. So we're going to take Shedeur out of it. We're going to take Cam Ward out of it. Who are some of those guys that you think could be there? And here's where I'm going with. Say the Browns decide they're going to take someone, say they take Abdul Carter, for lack of a better prospect, at 2. Mm-hmm. Who are some guys that then they could come back in the 3rd or 4th round that you think, you know what, these guys could end up being pretty good NFL quarterbacks? Maybe not immediately, but they have the things that you would look for to be a good NFL quarterback.
Yeah, so I was looking at that. One of the names that kind of stood out was Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon. He's currently projected in that pick 80-ish range if you're looking at the consensus boards, and he offers a lot of encouraging data for his college career, suggesting that he could find some success in the NFL. You look at his numbers; they create one of the stronger profiles of this year's class, and since 2017 as well, 91st percentile PFF passing grade, 97th percentile turnover worthy play rate. He's better than average as far as taking sacks goes. He's not afraid to utilize his legs either. He averaged close to 7 rushing attempts per game for his career. So always nice to kind of have that added threat to your quarterback's game, right? And another guy with a ton of games started for his career, not just at Oregon, but at Oklahoma and Central Florida as well. So comes into the league with a lot of that valued experience that coaches tend to trust as well. So it could be an interesting name in the, I guess, day 2 and beyond.
All right, so let's turn our attention to running backs. Huge, I like a really deep running back class. So everybody knows Ashton Genty and Hampton from North Carolina are at the top. I'm gonna make you dive a little deeper. Again, let's go that 3rd, 4th round range, because that's where I think realistically the Browns could start to look. You know, they don't know about Nick Chubb. They need some young running backs. Who are guys in that 3rd, maybe late 2nd, 3rd, 4th round range that you think, you know what, this guy's going to be a really good pro?
Yeah. So again, another guy that looking at the consensus boards, 81st pick. So in that 3rd round range, Cam Sketabo from Arizona State is the kind of back that I think you can utilize in different situations where he'll be productive. He actually owns one of the best career PFF rushing grades for a college career that we've ever seen, behind like only Ashton Genty in this class. And he's done so thanks to one of the best like career forced missed tackle rates as well. 0.37 missed tackles forced per attempt is a 97th percentile mark since 2018. He's 98th percentile rushing grade versus stacked boxes as well. Offers a decent receiving profile, having seen over 140 targets for his college career, averaging a very strong 1.57 yards per route run. That's an 85th percentile mark for running back prospects since 2018. So you said young. I mean, he's for this class, he's on the older side at 23 years old already, but you're really looking at these guys for the kind of extent of their rookie contracts for the most part. And I think getting a proven productive back with as strong a college production profile as he has in the 3rd round, I think you go for that all day if you're a running back needy team.
All right, let's do the same thing. We'll do the same exercise with wide receivers. I would argue Browns need some playmakers. Wide receiver, we know you got McMillan and Ibuka, that are probably mid. McMillan will be early, but Ibuka's probably late 1st round. Who are some guys in that 3rd, 4th round range again that you like, that you think could really end up doing well in the NFL?
Yeah, so I know I mentioned an Oregon player before, but I think if we're looking at wide receivers in that 3rd round range, it's probably another Oregon player that stands out. Wide receiver Tez Johnson would be the one for me. He's in that consensus 80-ish range right now as well, though he might move up. We'll see. But definitely, like, he's a smaller wide receiver, maybe more suited for the slot. That's what he was in college, and I think with Elijah Moore departing in free agency, most likely, he played a ton in the slot for the Browns last season. I think Johnson could potentially fill that role. He posted an 89th percentile career yards per route run among wide receiver prospects since 2019. And I mentioned he's smaller, only about 5'10", 165 pounds, but didn't show any issues kind of getting off press. He was 89th percentile yards per route run versus press coverage for his college career. Really strong separator as well, and making guys miss in the open field is a part of his game. He owns a 90th percentile career yards after the catch per reception mark. So I think he could be, if we're looking at the most optimistic version, like Tank Dell-esque, if we're talking about like optimal outcomes for a player that size, and I think could fill a need for the Browns in the slot if he works out.
Yeah, you mentioned Dell. He's kind of a guy that's opened up the smaller wide receiver because, he's been hurt both of the years he's been in the league. But when he's been healthy, he's been effective and a threat.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's been really, really effective. And that was his calling card being, coming out of college too, really productive. And I think Tez Johnson, that kind of opens things up for him a little bit, because you don't see a lot of wide receivers that weight range of 165 entering into the NFL draft or getting drafted highly. So him being in that consensus 80-ish range right now, I think is promising and speaks a lot to his skill set.
John Macri, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, John.
Thanks for having me.
John Macri, make sure you check him out, Pro Football Focus. He is one of their data analysts. Always really good stuff. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. See you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.